I am Sophia Reynolds, 39 years old. To the outside world, I am an invisible guardian, watching over some of the most influential leaders in the nation. But to my own kin, I am merely a washed-up courier hauling packages. The tipping point came that night at the extravagant engagement bash in Winnetka. As soon as I stepped inside, my sister Brooke sneered and presented me to her tycoon future in-laws. Meet Sophia. She's a van driver, dropping off fitness gear. Need a parcel moved? She's your gal. The entire gathering erupted in chuckles. My folks lingered there, bobbing their heads, their gazes brimming with embarrassment and sympathy toward me. They had no clue that a Glock 19 was still toasty beneath my blazer from safeguarding. The Attorney General, mere half an hour before, they figured I was a low-rung charity case. They were oblivious that a single call shortly after would cause the mightiest figure in that space to quiver and dip his head in deference to me. Share your viewing spot and 1. Subscribe if you've ever been demeaned by your blood relatives. The revelation is imminent. There's a unique serenity in polishing a firearm. It's systematic. It's rational. It clicks in a manner my relatives never could. I sat at my breakfast bar, the aroma of break-free CLP solvent permeating the atmosphere, a fragrance that signifies control to me, but might reek of danger to my mom. My Glock 19 lay in pieces on the mat before me. This isn't merely a pistol. It's the go-to sidearm for the Executive Protection Division. It's part of my arm. I'd just swabbed the guide. Rod when my cell hummed, rattling fiercely on the quartz surface. I knew the caller without glancing. The buzz's cadence seemed insistent. It was B. I cleaned the lubricant off my digits with a lint-free rag before hitting accept. Sophia. At last, Brooke's tone piped sharp and diminutive via the audio. She dominated my Samsung display, even on a lazy Wednesday noon. Video chat, my junior sibling appeared primed for a magazine spread. Her locks were styled impeccably, probably a $75 treatment at the boutique nearby. She donned a Ralph Lauren cashmere sweater that likely exceeded my parents' weekly food expense. In the backdrop, I spotted the immaculate gray den of her townhouse, all arranged, all artificial. "Hey, B," I replied, tone even. I peeked at my ensemble, a worn hoodie and faded Wranglers, not tinkering with that. Gearhead junk again, huh? Brooke narrowed her eyes at the camera, spotting the dark streak of firearm grease on my knuckle. Whatever. Listen, I'm short on time. Mani-pedi in 15. Just gotta review the etiquette for tomorrow evening. Etiquette. A term I applied to convoys and egress paths. Brooke applied it to place settings and canapes. Got the schedule B. 6:30, Winnetka, I stated, grasping the slide of my handgun to check the chamber. Yep. But hear me out. She bent nearer to the lens, her pitch falling to that plodding murmur she employed for veiled barbs. I've been pondering your outfit. Still got that gray shift? The cotton blend one from Cousin Mike's Memorial 4. Years back? I halted. I recalled precisely which garment she referenced. It was baggy, crafted from budget rayon and a tad bleached at the edges. Something I snagged on sale since I lacked time to browse amid ops in Baghdad and Chicago. It aged me a decade and added 15 pounds. Yeah, I own it, I affirmed, but I intended the charcoal pantsuit Nope, B interrupted briskly. No pantsuits. Geez, Sophia, you come off so butch in those. It's a betrothal fete, not a depot hiring session. Besides, the Hargroves are super traditional, ultra refined. Don't want you seeming overeager. The gray shift fits better. It's modest, matches your vibe. My vibe. I grabbed a Q-tip and started scrubbing the extractor groove. Roger that, I uttered. The gray shift. Modest. Awesome. She beamed, revealing bleached chompers. Oh, and the rig, the beast. She meant my Chevy Silverado. To her, a hillbilly blight. To me, a customized fortified monster with a diesel mill, able to smash through barriers if needed. It was Fed property masked as a private workhorse. What's up with it? Don't valet at the entrance, Brooke commanded, flicking her palm casually. Heck, not even curbside. The association in the Hargrove district is ruthless. If they spot that hunk with the splash guards and scrapes, it tanks the curb appeal just by lurking. Stash it a couple streets over, the stroll do you good. My cheek muscle clenched. She was exiling my ride, my rolling ops hub, to obscurity since it clashed with her vibe. Can do. A few blocks away, I conceded. My timbre stayed composed. Seneca once penned, "The finest retribution is to differ from the one who inflicted the wound." I wouldn't holler, I wouldn't debate, I'd persist. Spot on. She glanced at her timepiece, a slim Rolex our folks gifted, for acing the LSAT. They offered me a thumbs up when I finished the Special Agent Academy. One more bit. Sophia, crucial. She stared straight via the display. The grin faded. When folks inquire, and they will, 'cause they're courteous, about your gig, she hesitated, exhaling like, my being was a load she bore. Keep it fuzzy. Mention you're in supply chain aid or you oversee shipments. Skip tales of cross-state hauls or whatever with those crates. Elliot's dad is a congressman. Sophia, no mortifying with working-class chatter. Supply chain, I echoed. And shipments. Precisely. Brief, grin, nibble the hors d'oeuvres, and fade into the decor. All right, gotta dash, love ya. The feed cut before a farewell. I lingered in my kitchen's hush. The love ya reverberated in the vacant space, ringing as empty as an ejected mag. Deliberately, I reassembled the Glock. Slide, spring, rod, frame, clack, lock. The sidearm was intact once more, chill, hefty, primed. I rose and approached the quote, partition by the fridge. A dim nook of the kitchen, obscured by the appliance. Suspended there, askew, was an oak plaque with a silver engraving. The U.S. Department of Justice, Federal Bureau of Investigatio and Commendation for Bravery, awarded to Special Agent Sophia Reynolds for valor in the line of duty during the cartel raid in El Paso for steadfast resolve under assault. It was grimy, hadn't eyed it in weeks. My parents never glanced, not ever. On visits, Mom draped a planner over it, claiming the bureau emblem seemed too intense. I extended and aligned the mount. Brooke desired me diminutive. She craved the Sib, who piloted a battered van and sported thrift synthetics. She required that edition of me. If I was the flop, she was the triumph. If I was the gloom, she was the glow. It was the sole pattern my kin grasped. I could have spilled right there on the call. I could have revealed that supply chain signified orchestrating the transit of covert ops gear. I could have disclosed that the crates I handled occasionally held encrypted data thwarting terror plots from igniting. But I refrained since that wasn't the part they cast me in the Reynolds clan screenplay. Okay, B, I murmured to the void chamber, flipping off the lamps. I'll don the washed-out shift. I'll stash in the shade. I'll be your silhouette. Yet silhouettes tend to expand when the light begins to wane. There's a passage in Proverbs 27:19 that I've muttered to myself countless times while wide-eyed in remote motel suites across the globe. As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. I ain't no sage, I don't pretend to be, but the essence carries a stifling heft. It clarifies how I can be entrusted with shielding a Supreme Court justice on Thursday, and handled like a handout recipient by my ma on Friday. This misapprehension didn't erupt suddenly. It wasn't a grand deception that detonated. It was a gradual, insidious corrosion of fact that commenced precisely 14 years prior. I recollect the date vividly. It was a brisk Saturday in October. I'd just motored back from Quantico, Virginia straight from the FBI Academy. I was 25, drained, but humming with a charged sort of dignity. I'd earned my credentials. I was formally a special agent with the Executive Protection Unit. I entered my parents' abode, the identical ranch in the burbs with the trimmed yard, and the stars and stripes by the stoop overflowing with updates. My dad was in his haven, the family room. He was buried in his faux leather lounger, a worn brew on the mat, his peepers fixed on the giant flat screen. College football blared. The Bears were trailing by a field goal, and the vibe in the space was denser than the pipe haze on the drapes. "Pop," I announced, positioning before the set, obstructing the scrimmage view. I nailed it. Passed. "I'm an operative." He tilted left, attempting to peer past my flank. "Shift, Sophia." They're at midfield. Pop, heed. I secured the post, the Justice Department. He muted the broadcast at last, but avoided my stare. He eyed the controller in his grip. Justice Dept? Governed? Yeah? Fed? Affirmative, I glowed, delving into my pouch for the bifold with the silver shield. It's federal enforcement. I'll be guarding. Benefits include vision? He cut in, swigging his ale. And retirement? The 401k solid? Commit for 25, Sophia, and you're golden. Steady perks, dull, but secure. He skipped interest in the evasive maneuvers I mastered. He ignored the marksmanship drills or seminars on cyber threats. To him, I'd snagged a cubicle spot at the IRS that coincidentally offered solid IRA options. It ain't dull, Pop. It's perilous. I'm an operative. I sought to amend. From the galley, Brooke sauntered in. She was 23 then, fresh in. Grad school, honing that viper grin. She spied the shield in my palm and didn't flinch. An operative? Brooke chortled, munching a cherry. Like Bond. Come on, Sophia, you flunked. PE in senior year. Daddy, she's essentially a bodyguard for dignitaries, you know. Verifying badges, unlocking barriers for VIPs, like an upscale bouncer. I ain't a bouncer, I retorted. I safeguard officials. Sure, Brooke dismissed, swatting her mitt as she perched on Pop's armrest. You ferry them, ensure their laundry's protected. It's transport backup crew. Pop reactivated the sound. The fans bellowed. Score. Well, Pop grumbled. Focus returned to the tube. Ensure you enroll in disability coverage. Can't be overcautious navigating Cheetown rush. That instant sowed the kernel. Across the ensuing decade plus, Brooke nurtured that kernel with resentment and calculated spite. She couldn't tolerate her elder sis potentially engaging in something epic or valiant, while she drowned in patent filings. Thus, she turned my interpreter to the clan. When I deployed to Mosul for consulate fortification, Brooke informed the kin, Sophia's abroad kinda fed messenger role. She ferries docs. When assigned to the AG's guard team, jetting on private charters, Brooke advised the block. She's in transit now. She pilots the shuttles for brass, chauffeuring them. And gradually, as the whisper chain twisted reality, piloting shuttles morphed to steering a rig and ferrying sensitive files became dropping parcels. By 33, in my folks' view, I was basically a glorified Postmates runner with clearance. It wasn't solely verbiage, it was deeds. 4 months passed, I returned to an envelope in my postbox. A note from Ma. I unsealed it, anticipating perhaps an anniversary wire or kin update. Instead, a scatter of clippings tumbled to my tile. I crouched to gather. They were vouchers from the weekly circular. Jimmy John's, BOGO footlong, Wendy's, Duo burgers for $5, Valvoline. $15 off lube job, a post-it clung to the Valvoline one in Ma's script. Sophia, dear, aware you rack miles on that rig and fuel costs are skyrocketing. Figured these could aid with snacks en route. Don't be haughty to redeem. Love, Ma. I lingered in my galley clutching a voucher for a cheeseburger while my plate carrier rested on the stool beside. They didn't act from malice. My parents ain't antagonists in a thriller. They're ordinary. They're petrified of the unfamiliar and fixated on facades. The reality is their apathy stings worse than animosity. Animosity suggests I matter sufficiently to elicit response. Apathy conveys I am mere ambience hum. If you've ever felt the outcast because your kin refuses to perceive your genuine merit, I need you to pause for a second. Press that like button right now. It's a small signal to the world that we exist. And tell me in the comments below, I am not who they say I am. Let's confuse the algorithm with the truth. I looked at those coupons and I finally understood the ecosystem of the Reynolds family. For Brooke to be the golden child, the successful, wealthy, brilliant lawyer, she needed a contrast. She needed someone to be below her. If I were a high-ranking federal agent protecting world leaders, I would be her equal. Or worse, I might overshadow her. My parents couldn't handle that. They needed the narrative to be simple. Brooke is the success. Sophia is the struggle. That order kept them safe. That order kept them comfortable. They believe I am a failure. I said to the empty air of my apartment, crumpling the Wendy's coupon in my fist. Because believing I am a failure makes them feel successful. So I let them believe it. I let them have their comfort. I let them have their small, tidy little lies. But tomorrow, the lies were going to collide with my reality. Because while they thought I was driving a delivery truck, I was preparing to command a motorcade that would shut down the entire Kennedy Expressway, and God help anyone who stood in my way. At 05 net hours, the tarmac at O'Hare International Airport is a desolate, windswept expanse of gray concrete. The air smells of burnt jet fuel and freezing rain. It's a smell that triggers a specific physiological response in me. My heart rate slows down, my pupils dilate, and the blindness world narrows into a grid of potential threats. I stood by the rear door of the armored SUV, my delivery truck, as my family calls it, but this morning, it wasn't carrying boxes. It was part of a 3-vehicle convoy waiting to receive a high-value asset. A foreign witness vital to a federal trafficking case was stepping off a C-130 transport plane. Perimeter is tight, Reynolds. The voice crackled in my earpiece. It was Martinez, one of the Marines from the embassy security detail. We have eyes on all exits. I tapped my comms. Copy that. Keep the engine running. We moved the second feet, hit the ground. The ramp of the aircraft lowered with a mechanical whine. A gust of wind whipped my short hair across my face, but I didn't flinch. 6 Marines in full combat gear flanked the witness. They moved with a synchronized, lethal grace that you only see in men who have trusted each other with their lives. As they approached my vehicle, the lead Marine, a sergeant major with a jaw like granite, stopped in front of me. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He gave me a sharp, respectful nod. A recognition of rank and capability. "All yours, ma'am," he said, his voice cutting through the roar of the engines. "Safe travels." "Thank you, Sergeant. We'll take it from here." We loaded the witness. The door slammed shut with a heavy, reassuring thud of bulletproof steel. Jerry, my RSO regional security officer, slapped the hood of the truck twice. He walked up to my window as I shifted the heavy vehicle into gear. Jerry is a man of few words, a Vietnam vet who has seen more combat than most action movie stars. "Good work, Reynolds," Jerry said, his eyes scanning the horizon one last time. "That was a textbook extraction. You're the iron shield of this unit. I don't know what we'd do without you." The iron shield? I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the car heater. Respect, competence, purpose. In this world, on this tarmac, I was essential. I was powerful. I guided the convoy out of the secure zone, watching the sunrise bleed orange over the Illinois skyline. My job was done. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind the dull ache in my lower back that comes from wearing a 20 pounds tactical vest for 6 hours. I pulled into a lay-by to strip off the vest and secure my weapon in the lockbox. That was when my personal phone buzzed on the passenger seat. The screen lit up. "Mom." I stared at it. The contrast was jarring. One minute I was Reynolds, the Iron Shield. The next I was Sophia, the daughter. I unlocked the phone. "Sophia, honey, are you on? To your way back from your night shift? Since you have the big truck, can you stop by Costco? We need drinks for Bee's party tonight. 5 cases of LaCroix, pamplemousse flavor, and maybe 5 cases of Diet Coke. The 36-pack ones. It saves us the delivery fee, and your truck has plenty of room." "Thanks. I read the message twice. My truck. This vehicle has run-flat tires, reinforced plating, capable of stopping a 7.62mm round, and an encrypted satellite communication system, and my mother saw it as a grocery cart. She didn't ask if I was tired. She didn't ask if I was safe. She just saw a big truck and free labor. I looked at the dashboard. I could say no. I could tell her I had a debriefing. I could tell her the truth, that this is a government vehicle and I shouldn't be hauling soda for a suburban engagement party. But I didn't, because the conditioning runs deep, because fighting them takes more energy than just doing the damn task. "Copy that," I whispered to no one, putting the truck in drive. 40 minutes later, I was in the purgatory known as the Costco parking lot. I maneuvered the massive black SUV into a spot between a minivan covered in stick figure, family decals, and a sedan with a student driver bumper sticker. I stepped out, still wearing my tactical pants and heavy boots, though I had swapped my tactical shirt for the flannel one. People stared. I looked like I was ready to invade the rotisserie chicken aisle. Walking through the warehouse was a surreal experience. An hour ago, I was scanning for snipers. Now, I was scanning for the best price on sparkling water. I wrestled 5 cases of La Croix and 5 cases of Diet Coke onto a flatbed cart. They were heavy, awkward. The physical exertion was nothing compared to training, but the mental weight was crushing. I paid with my own card. Mom always forgot to transfer the money until weeks later, and hauled the load back to the truck. By the time I pulled up to Brooke's condo complex, the sun was high and bright. It was a nice place, gated, manicured hedges, the kind of place where people called the police if a car was parked on the street for too long. I backed into the driveway and texted Brooke, "I'm here." The front door opened. Brooke stood there, wrapped in a silk robe, holding her hands up in the air like a surgeon scrubbing in for an operation. "Oh, thank God," she called out, not stepping a foot outside. "I just put on my second coat of polish, ballet slippers pink. I literally can't touch anything for 20 minutes. I got out of the truck. The heat radiating off the asphalt hit me. "Where do you want these?" I asked, grabbing the first 2 cases of soda. My biceps strained against the flannel. "Just bring them into the living room," she directed, waving a wet fingernail toward the open door. "Stack them in the corner by the bar cart, but be careful." I walked past her, carrying 50 pounds of carbonated water. I smelled the chemical tang of acetone and expensive perfume. It replaced the smell of jet fuel in my nose. "Careful!" Brooke shrieked as I stepped onto the entryway. "I just had the hardwood floors refinished last week. Do not drag those boxes, Sophia. Lift them. If you scratch the oak, Elliot will have a heart attack." I stopped in the middle of her living room. My boots that had kicked down doors in training simulations, squeaked slightly on the pristine, polished wood. Sweat trickled down my spine. "I've got it." "B," I grunted, lowering the boxes slowly. "Make sure they're straight," she added, leaning against the door frame, blowing on her nails. "And try not to track any dirt in. Your boots look dusty. Did you come from a construction site or something?" I looked up at her. "The airport," I said quietly. "Gay, the airport." She wrinkled her nose. "So, Jeremy, you should probably wash your hands before you touch any of the food prep stuff later." I set the last case of Diet Coke down. Clunk. "I'm the Iron Shield," I thought to myself, the words sounding bitter and distant now. Here in this house, I wasn't a shield. I wasn't an agent. I was a mule. A mule with dirty boots who... I needed to be careful not to scratch the precious floor of the Golden Child. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Is that all?" I asked. "For now?" Brooke smiled, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Thanks, Sophia. You're a lifesaver. Honestly, paying for delivery is just such a scam when you have a truck, right?" "Right," I said. "A scam." I walked out the door back to my armored beast, feeling smaller than I ever did on the tarmac. The walk from where I parked my truck took exactly 12 minutes. Brooke had been right about one thing. The neighborhood was pristine. It was Winnetka, Illinois, a place where wealth whispers rather than shouts. The streets were lined with ancient oak trees that formed a canopy over the road, blocking out the stars. The houses were set far back from the street, hidden behind wrought iron gates and manicured boxwood hedges. I walked along the sidewalk, the heels of my old shoes, clicking unevenly on the pavement. The gray cotton dress Brooke had insisted I wear felt heavy and suffocating against my skin. It didn't breathe. It clung to me in all the wrong places, making me feel less like a woman and more like an improperly wrapped package. As I rounded the corner onto the Hargrove estate, the silence of the neighborhood was replaced by the low hum of a social event in full swing. The driveway was a parking, a lot of European engineering. I counted 3 black Range Rovers, 2 Mercedes S-Class sedans, and a Tesla Model X with the Falcon doors open. A team of valet attendants in red vests was moving with the efficiency of a pit crew, whisking cars away so the guests wouldn't have to walk more than 10 feet. I, of course, had walked 6 blocks. I approached the main entrance. The house was a massive brick colonial revival, illuminated by tasteful landscape. lighting that made the red bricks glow like embers. A man in a black suit stood at the base of the front steps. He held a clipboard and wore an earpiece. He looked like private security, probably ex-police, judging by the way he stood with his hands clasped in front of his belt buckle. As I stepped onto the slate walkway, he moved one step to the left, just enough to block my path. "Excuse me, miss," he said. His voice was polite, but his eyes were hard. He scanned me. The frizzy hair from the humidity, the cheap dress, the scuffed shoes. He didn't see a guest. He saw a problem. "The service entrance is around the side," he said, pointing a thumb toward a dark path lined with garbage cans. "Catering staff needs to check. In with the house manager at the kitchen door." I stopped. My hand instinctively twitched toward my hip where my badge usually rested, but tonight there was no badge, just cotton. "I'm not with the catering staff," I said, keeping my voice level. The guard raised an eyebrow. He looked down at his clipboard, then back at me. He clearly didn't believe me. "This is a private event, miss. The guest list is strictly enforced." "I know," I said. "I'm Sophia Reynolds, the bride's sister." He paused. He looked at the list. He ran his finger down the names, taking his sweet time as if he expected to find me on a band list rather than the family section. "Reynolds," he muttered. He found it. He looked disappointed. "Right, go on in." He stepped aside, but he didn't apologize. He just watched me walk up the steps, his gaze lingering on the back of my dress. I could feel the judgment burning a hole between my shoulder blades. Inside, the air changed. It was cooler, conditioned to a perfect 68 degrees, and smelled of money. It's a specific scent, a mix of expensive beeswax polish, fresh hydrangeas, and Joe Malone diffusers. A live jazz band was playing in the corner of the grand foyer. The saxophone player was smooth, filling the space with low, sultry notes. Waiters in white tuxedo jackets weaved through the crowd carrying silver trays of raw oysters and crystal flutes of champagne. I stood in the entryway for a moment, letting my eyes adjust. It was a tactical habit. Scan the room, identify exits, identify threats. The threat level here was 0 physically, but psychologically it was catastrophic. Everyone looked like they had been airbrushed. The women wore silk and cashmere, their jewelry understated but clearly insured for millions. The men wore bespoke suits that fit them like second skins. And then there was me, a gray smudge in a room of golden cream. "Sophia." The voice cut through the jazz. It was Brooke. She was standing near the fireplace holding a glass of white wine. She looked stunning. I had to admit her dress was a shimmering silver sheath that caught the light with every movement. She waved me over, her smile tight and frantic. I took a breath and walked into the fray. Into the lion's den. "You made it," Brooke hissed, as I got close, leaning into, air kiss my cheek so she wouldn't smudge her lipstick. "And you wore the dress. Good, you blend in." I didn't blend in. I stood out like a sore thumb, and she knew it. "Come on," she said, gripping my elbow with surprising force. "Elliot and Margaret are asking about you. Don't be weird," she steered me toward a couple standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows. Elliot Hargrove looked exactly like his pictures in the business journals. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and a face that was permanently flushed from good scotch and high blood pressure. Beside him was Margaret. Margaret Hargrove was terrifying. She was a petite woman, but she took up all the oxygen in the room. She wore a cream-colored Chanel suit and a single strand of pearls that were large enough to be choking hazards. Her hair was a helmet of blonde perfection. "Mom, Dad," Brooke said, her voice dropping an octave to sound more demure. "This is my sister, the one I told you about, Sophia." Margaret turned. Then came the scan. I have been scanned by retinal readers at CIA headquarters. I have been patted down by airport security and war zones, but nothing felt as invasive as Margaret Hargrove's eyes. She started at my hair. Her gaze moved down to the collar of my dress, noting the fraying stitching. She looked at my hands, no manicure, short nails, a small callus on my thumb from the gun safety. She looked at my hips, then my legs, and then she stopped at my feet. I was wearing a pair of black pumps. I had bought at DSW 5 years ago. The leather on the left toe was scuffed from driving. The heel on the right was slightly worn down. Margaret stared at that scuff mark for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, she calculated my entire net worth, my education level, and my social standing, and the result was deficient. She looked back up at my face. Her expression hadn't changed, but the warmth in her eyes had dropped to absolute zero. "Sophia," Margaret said. Her voice was like dry ice. "We've heard so much about you." "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Hargrove," I said, extending my hand. She looked at my hand for a split second before taking it. Her handshake was limp, like she was afraid she might catch something. "B tells us, you're quite the traveler," Elliot boomed, trying to fill the silence. "Driving all over the country. Must be interesting seeing the real America from the road." He spoke loudly as if I were hard of hearing or slow to understand. "It has its moments," I said neutrally. "Sophia is very free-spirited," Brooke interjected quickly, resting her head on Elliot's talonate shoulder in a show of daughterly affection. "She doesn't like the corporate grind like we do. She prefers the open road. No bosses, no deadlines, no structure. Just her and the boxes." "No structure?" I almost laughed. My life was defined by the strictest structure on the planet. Chain of command, rules of engagement, federal law. "Is that so?" Margaret asked, tilting her head. A small, pitying smile played on her lips. "I suppose that must be freeing. Not everyone is cut out for ambition. I suppose some people are just happier living simply." "Exactly," Brooke said, squeezing Elliot's arm. "Sophia is all about the simple life." I stood there, surrounded by millionaires holding a glass of water I didn't want, listening to them rewrite my life into a tragedy of wasted potential. "Well," Elliot said, clapping his hands together. "The world needs people to move things around, doesn't it? Essential services and all that." "Indeed," Margaret murmured, turning her attention back to a waiter passing with a tray of caviar blinis. "Someone has to do it." They turned away from me, the conversation effectively over. I'd been assessed, categorized as the help, and dismissed. I stood alone in the middle of the room, clutching my purse against the cheap cotton of my dress. My gun, usually a comforting weight against my ribs, was miles away in the lockbox of my truck. I felt naked without it. But the night wasn't over. The crowd was growing, and Brooke's friends, the sharks, in suits, were starting to circle. I could feel their eyes on me, sensing the weakness, smelling the blood in the water. The circle formed around me before I could escape. It was a predatory formation, one I had seen wolves use in nature documentaries. But here, the predators were wearing Brooks Brothers suits and holding tumblers of single malt scotch. These were B's friends, the DC up-and-comers, corporate lawyers, lobbyists, and junior partners who measured their self-worth in billable hours and the discounts horsepower of their latest BMWs. "So you're the sister," said a man who had introduced himself as Brad. He was leaning against a marble pillar, swirling the ice in his glass. He had the kind of face that had never known a day of hardship, smooth, tanned, and smug. "B says, you're in distribution, something like that," I said, gripping my glass of sparkling water. "I work in secure logistics." "Logistics?" Brad repeated, chuckling as he glanced at his friends. "That's a fancy word for it. My cousin tells girls he's in petroleum transfer engineering. When he pumps gas in New Jersey." The group erupted in laughter. It was a sharp, performative sound. "No, but seriously," another guy chimed in, loosening his tie. "It's the gig economy, right? Everyone is doing it. Freedom. Be your own boss. I respect the hustle." He didn't respect the hustle. His tone dripped with sarcasm. "I'm curious though, Brad," continued, taking a step closer, invading my personal space. "When you're driving those trucks, do you get to keep the stuff that people don't pick up? Like, if someone orders a meal kit and isn't home, do you just take it? Must save a fortune on groceries." "Yeah," a woman in a red dress giggled. "Do you eat the leftovers? Is that a perk of the job?" My hand tightened around my glass, the crystal etched into my palm. I thought about the cargo I had transported that morning. A witness who had seen a cartel execution. If I had kept him, it would be kidnapping. "The cargo I transport is strictly monitored," I said, my voice low. "And it's not food." Sure, Brad winked. "Whatever you say. Hey, does Uber Eats have a dental plan yet? Or is that still just a dream? More laughter. I felt the heat rising up my neck, not from shame, but from a dark, simmering rage. I could dismantle Brad in 3 seconds. A strike to the solar plexus, a sweep of the leg. He would be on the floor gasping for air before his expensive scotch hit the rug. But I couldn't. I was in the gray cotton dress. I was Sophia the failure. Actually, a voice boomed from behind me. It was my father. For a split second, a foolish, childish part of me thought he was coming to save me, to tell these entitled brats to back off, to say, "My daughter serves her country." I turned to look at him. He was holding a glass of red wine, his face flushed with the excitement of being near the elites. "She's just stubborn," my father said, shaking his head with a theatrical sigh. He looked at Brad, desperate for approval, desperate to be part of the joke. "We tried, didn't we, honey?" He gestured to my mother, who was hovering nearby. "We told her to go back to school, community college, get a nursing degree, something stable. But no, Sophia likes to drive. She likes looking at the scenery." My stomach dropped. He wasn't saving me, he was selling me out. He was using my humiliation as currency to buy his way into their conversation. "Community college is a great option," the woman in red said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It's very accessible." She wouldn't listen, my father continued, avoiding my eyes. "Always had to do things the hard way. That's Sophia for you, a bit of a rough diamond." "Very rough." "Dad," I said, the word coming out like a warning. "What?" He looked at me, feigning innocence. "I'm just telling them the truth. You could have been a paralegal, like B suggested. Air conditioning, a desk, but you prefer the open road." He made it sound like I was a hobo jumping on freight trains. "My work requires a level of focus and judgment that most people wouldn't understand," I said, looking directly at Brad. My voice was steady, cutting, through the laughter like a knife. "One mistake in my line of work doesn't result in a paperwork error. It results in catastrophe." The circle went quiet for a beat. My tone had shifted. The delivery girl had just spoken with the authority of a field commander. Brad blinked, looking unsure for a moment, but the tension was broken by a heavy hand landing on my shoulder. It was Elliot Hargrove, the patriarch. He squeezed my shoulder, not affectionately, but with the weight of ownership. He smiled down at me, his eyes crinkling with what looked like kindness but felt like pity. Now, Elliot boomed, his voice rich and baritone, silencing the group. "Let's not give Sophia a hard time." He looked around the circle, playing the role of the benevolent king, defending his peasant. "Society needs people like Sophia," Elliot said, giving my shoulder another patronizing pat. "Think about it, without people willing to do the heavy lifting, the driving, the serving, how would we function? We wouldn't have our packages, we wouldn't have our dinners delivered warm." He looked at me, his eyes locking onto mine. "It is a noble service, my dear," he said, speaking slowly, enunciating every word as if I were a child or mentally slow. "Knowing your place in the ecosystem is a virtue. Not everyone is meant to lead. Not everyone is meant to create policy or build empires. Some people are the hands and feet, and we thank you for that. Really, it's a worthy contribution." The room seemed to tilt. Knowing your place, he wasn't defending me. He was defining me. He was putting me in a box, a small labeled box at the bottom of his pyramid. To him, I was the biological equivalent of a forklift, useful, necessary, but not sentient, not equal. "Thank you, Elliot," I said. My voice sounded hollow to my own ears. "I'm glad I can serve. That's the spirit." Elliot laughed, releasing my shoulder. "Now, who needs a refill?" I opened a 1,998 Bordeaux that is breathing beautifully. The circle broke. They turned, their backs on me, drawn away by the promise of expensive wine, leaving me standing alone in the center of the rug. I stared at their backs, the tailored suits, the silk, dresses, the confident posture of people who have never had to check under their car for an IED. My phone tucked into the small clutch purse I was holding began to vibrate against my palm. It was a long, sustained vibration, not a text, a call. I looked, down at the screen. It wasn't my mother. It wasn't Brooke. The screen flashed red. Incoming secure call. Central Command. I took a deep breath, the air in the room suddenly feeling thin and stale. The humiliation that had been burning my skin seconds ago evaporated, replaced by the wurge, icy clarity of duty. The delivery girl was about to clock out. The agent was clocking in. The phone in my hand felt radioactive. The screen pulsed red. A silent siren in the middle of the polite, murmuring crowd. Incoming secure call, Central Command. I didn't answer it immediately. Protocol dictated I move to a secure perimeter. I turned on my heel, ignoring the confused look from the waiter holding a tray of empty champagne flutes, and stepped quickly into the hallway. The heavy oak doors muffled the sound of the jazz band. But the silence out here was deafening. I swiped the screen. "Reynolds," I said. My voice had dropped an octave. The submissive sister was gone. "Code red. Reynolds," I repeat. "Code red." It was Jerry. His voice was tight, clipped, fighting against a background of chaotic radio chatter. "We have a situation. The attorney's motorcade has been boxed in on Kennedy Expressway, 2 miles south of your location. Local PD is overwhelmed. We have a credible threat of an ambush. The lead vehicle is disabled." My blood ran cold. Kennedy Expressway. At this hour, it was a parking lot of commuters. A sitting duck scenario. Attorney General Ellis, the man who held the nuclear codes for legal relations, was trapped in a metal box surrounded by potential hostiles. "Status of the asset?" I asked, my eyes scanning the hallway for cameras. "Asset is secure for now, but exposure is high. We need an extraction route and immediate fire support. You are the closest unit. What is your ETA?" I looked down at my watch, then at my gray cotton dress, then at my scuffed shoes. "I have the beast," I said, referring to my up-armored truck. "I can be there in 4 minutes if I jump the median." "Do it," Jerry barked. "Get him out of there, Sophia. Bring him to the safe house. You are authorized to use lethal force. Go." The line went dead. 4 minutes. I shoved the phone back into my clutch. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a steady, rhythmic thud, thump, 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 thump. It wasn't fear, it was fuel. I needed to leave now. I turned back toward the main party room. The quickest way to the front door was through the crowd. I didn't have time to skirt. Around the service entrance. I pushed open the double doors. The room had quieted down. Elliot Hargrove was standing by the fireplace, tapping a spoon against his crystal glass. Clink, clink, clink. He was preparing to make a toast. The guests were freezing in place, turning their attention to the patriarch. I moved. I didn't walk. I cut through the room with a stride that was too long, too purposeful for a party guest. I wasn't weaving through people. I was calculating trajectories. "Excuse me," I muttered, brushing past Brooke's friend Brad, nearly knocking the scotch out of his hand. He glared at me, but I was already gone. I made it to the edge of the foyer, 10 feet from the heavy front door, 10 feet from freedom, 10 feet from the mission. And then she stepped in front of me, my mother. She materialized from the crowd like a blockade. In her right hand she held a large silver cake knife. It was ornate with a pearl handle glinting under the crystal chandelier. Behind her, a waiter was wheeling out a 5-tier cake covered in white fondant and sugar flowers. "Sophia," she whispered, her voice hissed through clenched teeth. She blocked my path physically. "Where do you think you are going?" Elliot is about to speak. "I have to leave, Mom," I said. I didn't stop moving until I was inches from her face. "Right now. Emergency." She didn't step aside. Instead, she raised the knife. Slightly, not as a weapon, but as a pointer, gesturing indignantly at the room. "Emergency?" she scoffed. Her eyes darted around to see if anyone was watching us. "What kind of emergency, Sophia? Did someone order a salad and forget the dressing? Did a box fall off the truck?" "Mom, move," I said. My tone was icy. It was the voice I used to order civilians to get down during a raid. But she wasn't a civilian. She was my mother, and she was immune to my authority. "You are not ruining this," she said, her voice rising. "Brooke has worked for months on this night. We are about to cut the cake. It's tradition. You cannot leave before the cake is cut. It's social suicide. I don't care about the cake." I said, my patience snapping like a dry twig. I have to go. She stared at me, her face twisting into a mask of incredulity. She looked at my cheap dress, my desperate expression, and then she laughed, a short, cruel sound. You can't wait 10 minutes? She asked loudly. Heads began to turn. Elliot stopped tapping his glass. The room fell into an awkward silence. Is the customer that important? Are they starving? Is the world going to end if someone doesn't get their meal kit on time? I looked at her. I looked at the silver knife in her hand. It was a tool for celebration, for sweetness, and she was using it to cut me open. I thought about telling her. I thought about screaming, I am going to save the Attorney General from an assassination attempt, but I looked at their faces. Elliot's annoyed frown, Brooke's mortified glare, the guests' amused smirks. They wouldn't believe me. They didn't want to believe me. They wanted the delivery driver. They wanted the failure. So, I gave them what they wanted. I looked my mother dead in the eye. My face went blank. The mask of the ghost slid into place. Yes, Mom, I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. The customer is very hungry, and they get very angry when I'm late. My mother's jaw dropped slightly. She looked validated yet disgusted. Go then, she sneered, stepping aside and waving the knife toward the door as if banishing a stray dog. Go do your job. Don't expect us to save you a piece. I didn't look back. I walked past her. I walked past the cake. I walked past Elliot, who was shaking his head in theatrical disappointment, as I pushed open the heavy front door, stepping out into the cool night air. I heard my mother's voice one last time. She wasn't whispering anymore. She was apologizing to the nearby guests, ensuring her social standing remained intact. I'm so sorry, everyone, she said, her voice dripping with fake sorrow. Sophia, well, she's always had a problem with priorities. It's a lack of education, really, just very unmannered. Unmannered. The door clicked shut behind me, severing the connection. The silence of the driveway hit me. The cool air filled my lungs. I didn't run to the truck. I sprinted, my heels dug into the gravel. But I didn't care. I reached the Chevy Silverado, my beast, and ripped the door open. I vaulted into the driver's seat. If you have ever had to walk away from people who claim to I love you just to save yourself, or to do what you knew was right, I need you to pause and hit that like button right now. Do it for the boundaries we have to set and tell me in the comments. I choose my mission. Let's show the world that walking away takes more strength than staying. I slammed the door shut, sealing myself inside the armored cocoon. The smell of leather and gun oil replaced the scent of expensive perfume. I punched the ignition. The diesel engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that shook the frame. It was the sound of power. I reached under the seat and pulled out my tactical vest. I threw it over my head, pulling the Velcro straps tight over the gray cotton dress. I didn't bother with the shoes. I kicked them off, pressing my bare foot against the gas pedal. I keyed the radio mic. Central, this is Agent Reynolds, I said, my voice steady as a rock. I am mobile. ETA, 3 minutes. Tell the attorney to keep his head down. The cavalry is coming. I shifted the truck into gear and peeled out of the Hargrove estate, leaving tire marks on their perfect asphalt. The party was over. The war had begun. Kennedy Expressway is a nightmare on a good day. Tonight, it was a parking lot. Red brake lights stretched as far as the eye could see. A river of stalled steel winding through the heart of Chicago. But I wasn't a commuter anymore. I was a weapon. I flipped the toggle switch on the dashboard of my Chevy Silverado. Hidden strobe lights behind the grille and windshield erupted in a blinding display of red and blue. I hit the siren, a low guttural whoop whoop that vibrated in my chest. People didn't just move, they scattered. The sight of a matte black lifted truck with government plates parting traffic like the Red Sea tends to trigger a primal instinct in suburban drivers. Inside the cab, the transformation was happening. I engaged the cruise control for 3 seconds, a dangerous maneuver at 40 miles per hour, just long enough to rip the Velcro straps of my tactical vest. I hauled the heavy Kevlar over my head. It settled onto my shoulders with a comforting weight. It covered the cheap gray cotton dress, hiding the failure underneath layers of ballistic protection. I kicked off my right pump, then the left. I drove barefoot for a quarter mile, weaving through the breakdown lane before jamming my feet into the tactical boots I kept wedged under the heater. I didn't have time to lace them fully, so I tucked the laces in, earpiece in, radio on. Central, I am 1 minute out. I barked into the comms. Give me a sit rep. Two hostiles in a sedan cut off the motorcade. Jerry's voice came through, clear and tense. Exchange of fire. Limo is disabled. Engine block hit. Suspects fled, but we anticipate a secondary attack. Local PD is on scene, but the perimeter is porous. I saw the smoke rising ahead. The intersection near the medical district was chaos. A black limousine sat sideways across 2 lanes, steam pouring from its hood. 2 Secret Service SUVs were boxed in around it, forming a defensive wedge. Chicago police cruisers were everywhere, their lights flashing, but there was no order. Officers were shouting, pushing back civilians who were filming with their phones. It was a circus. I didn't slow down until the last second. I drove my truck up over the concrete median, shredding the landscaped grass, and slammed the brakes right next to the lead police cruiser. I kicked the door open. A young CPD officer, adrenaline high, hand on his holster, stepped toward me. "Ma'am, get back in the vehicle. This is a crime scene," he yelled, seeing a woman in a flannel shirt and unlaced boots jumping out of a truck. I didn't stop walking. I reached to my belt, not for a weapon, but for the leather wallet clipped to my waist. I flipped it open. The gold badge of the executive. Protection Service caught the strobe lights. "Federal agent," I shouted, my voice cutting through the siren noise. "Stand down, officer." The cop froze. He saw the badge. He saw the vest. He saw the look in my eyes. A look that said I had authority over his entire existence right now. "I need a perimeter established at 100 yard, I ordered, pointing to the intersection. "Push those civilians back. If anyone crosses that line, you detain them. Do you understand?" "Yes. Yes, ma'am." He scrambled to obey, waving his arms at his partner. I moved past him, entering the kill box. The Secret Service agents recognized me immediately. Johnson, the lead on the attorney's detail, lowered his MP5 submachine gun slightly when he saw me. "Reynolds," he yelled. "Good to see you. We're sitting ducks here. I have the beast," I said, thumbing back toward my truck. "It's up armored. We extract him now. Get him to the safe house." I moved to the rear door of the damaged limousine. The window was spider-webbed with impact cracks, bulletproof, F-glass that had done its job, but barely. I tapped the glass 3 times, the signal, the door clicked, and pushed open. Attorney General Ellis sat inside. He was a man of 60, with the weight of American justice on his shoulders. He looked shaken, his tie loosened, holding a secure briefcase against his chest. When he looked up and saw me, his shoulders visibly dropped. The tension left his face. "Agent Reynolds," he exhaled, a breathy laugh escaping him. "Thank God. When I heard local support was coming, I was worried. I didn't know it was you." "I was in the neighborhood, Mr. Attorney," I said calmly, extending a hand to help him out. "Let's get you out of this tin can." "I trust you," he said simply. He took my hand. "Think about that. The man who negotiates legal treaties with hostile entities, the man who advises the president on justice, trusted me with his life. He didn't care about my dress. He didn't care about my bank account. He cared that I was the best. We moved quickly. I shielded, his body with mine, guiding him toward my truck. The Marines and Secret Service formed a phalanx around us. I opened the passenger door of my truck. "Get in. Keep your head down. Floorboard is reinforced." As I slammed the door shut, ensuring the top legal officer in the executive branch was safe, my phone, which I had thrown onto the dashboard, lit up. It was right there at eye level. The screen was bright against the dark interior. A text, message from Brooke. I shouldn't have looked, but in the split second, before I climbed into the driver's seat, my eyes caught the preview. "B, you are a disgrace to this family. Mom is crying in the bathroom because of you. Don't bother coming back. We don't want you here." I stared at the words. Disgrace. Behind me, sirens wailed. Beside me, the attorney. General was waiting for me to drive him to safety. Around me, federal agents were following my lead. And on that screen, I was a disgrace because I didn't stay to eat cake. The irony was so sharp, it felt like a physical blow. It was absurd. It was tragic. It was hilarious. "Agent Reynolds," the attorney asked from the passenger seat, his voice low. "Is everything all right? We need to move." I looked at the phone one last time. I didn't delete the message. I wanted to keep it. I wanted to remember exactly what they thought of me while I was busy saving the world. I reached out and flipped the phone face down. "Everything is clear, Mr. Attorney," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "We are moving." I stomped on the gas. The truck surged forward, pushing through the debris, leaving the chaos behind. But we needed a place to go. The safe house in Evanston was compromised by the traffic. The bureau was too far. I needed a secure location close by with high walls and gated access. Somewhere off the grid for 20 minutes until the backup team could arrive with the helicopter. I ran the mental map of Winnetka. There was only one place that fit the criteria. I gripped the steering wheel tight. Fate, it seemed, had a very twisted sense of humor tonight. "Central," I radioed in. "I am diverting to a temporary secure location. Mark my coordinates." I turned the wheel hard to the left. We were going back to the party. "Mr. Attorney," I said, keeping my eyes on the rearview mirror where the smoke from his disabled limousine was still rising into the night sky. "We can't wait here on the shoulder. The extraction team is 10 minutes out and this position is compromised. We need hard cover now." Attorney General Ellis looked out the window at the gridlocked traffic of Kennedy Expressway. He was calm, but I saw his hand tightening on the handle of his secure briefcase. "Where do you suggest, Agent Reynolds? The bureau is too far." "My sister's in-laws," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "The Hargrove estate. It's 3 minutes from here. High brick walls, gated access, minimal sightlines from the street. It's the only viable safe house in this sector." He looked at me, then at my tactical vest, then at the determined set of my jaw. "Do it," he said. I spun the steering wheel hard to the left. The Chevy Silverado's tires screeched as I jumped the curb, bypassing a stalled intersection. 3 minutes later, I was barreling down the tree-lined streets of Winnetka again. I didn't slow down for the gate this time. It was open. Guests were leaving early, likely due to the disturbance I had caused earlier. I drove the massive truck right up the center of the driveway, ignoring the frantic waves of the valet staff. I slammed on the brakes directly in front of the main entrance, parking diagonally across the steps. My truck blocked a Bentley and a Porsche, boxing them in. "Stay here," I instructed the attorney. "Keep your head down. Give me 30 seconds to clear the room and secure the perimeter." "Copy that," he nodded. I unlocked the door and stepped out. The air was still cool, smelling of expensive cologne and exhaust fumes. I placed my hand on the grip of my Glock 19, now openly holstered on my hip, and marched up the stairs. I didn't knock. I placed my boot against the heavy oak door and shoved it open. It swung inward with a heavy thud, crashing against the interior wall. The sound silenced the room instantly. The party had thinned out, but the core group was still there. Elliot, Margaret, Brooke, my parents, and about 20 close friends were gathered in the foyer, nursing their drinks and dissecting the drama of my earlier exit. When I stepped into the light, I looked like an alien invasion. I was barefoot in tactical boots, wearing a Kevlar vest over a gray cotton dress with a radio coil running up my neck, and a federal firearm on my hip. But they didn't see an agent. They didn't see the gun. They were so blinded by their own narrative that they only saw the delivery girl who had ruined their night. Brooke was the first to react. She broke away from a group of bridesmaids, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You have the audacity to come back here after the scene you caused." She marched toward me, stopping only because I held up a hand in a halt gesture. Step back," I said, my voice projecting with command authority. "I need everyone to clear this room immediately. This is a matter of national security." Brooke laughed, a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Oh my God, you are delusional. What? Did you forget your cooler? Did you forget a receipt for the soda?" "I am not joking," I said, scanning the upper landing for threats. "Clear the room. Get out," Elliot Hargrove roared. The patriarch stepped forward, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He looked at my muddy boots on his Persian rug. He looked at the truck blocking his driveway. He was trembling with fury. "This is private property, Miss Reynolds," Elliot bellowed. "You are trespassing. I don't care what kind of costume you are wearing or what game you are playing. You have insulted my wife. You have upset the bride. And now you are barging in here like a lunatic." "Mr. Hargrove," I tried to interject. "I am commandeering this location as a temporary." "I am calling the police," Elliot interrupted, reaching for his phone. "I am having you arrested. You clearly need mental help." "Elliot, please." My mother's voice whined from the back. She pushed her way to the front, dragging my father with her. My parents looked at me with a mixture of horror and exhaustion. To them, this wasn't a tactical operation. This was their daughter having a mental breakdown in front of the most important people they knew. "Sophia, stop it," my mother pleaded, wringing her hands. "Just go. Haven't you done enough damage? Why are you wearing that vest? You look ridiculous." "I am working, Mom," I said, through gritted teeth. "Working." My father stepped forward. The shame in his eyes was palpable. He looked at Elliot, then at me, and decided he needed to distance himself from his failure of a daughter one last time. "You are a disgrace, Sophia," my father spat out. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. "Look at you, barging into a respectable home, shouting, 'Orders for what? Did you lose your job? Are you here to beg for money because you got fired from the delivery route? Dad, listen to me.' No, you listen," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at my face. "You make us look like fools. You make us look like trash. All of this drama, just because you drive a truck, just because you deliver lunchboxes for a living, and you can't handle that your sister is a success." The room was deadly silent. The insult echoed off the marble floors. "Just because you deliver lunchboxes." It was the trap of contempt. They had built a cage for me out of their own insecurities, and they refused to let me out of it, even when the keys were staring them in the face. I looked at my father. I looked at Brooke, sneering in her silver dress. I looked at Elliot, dialing 911 on his phone. I felt a strange sense of calm. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was incinerated. "I am not here for money, Dad," I said quietly. "And I am not here for lunchboxes." I raised my hand to my earpiece. "Asset is entering the structure," I said into the mic. "What are you talking about?" B snapped. "Who are you talking to? You are insane." Before I could answer, the heavy front door behind me, which I had left ajar, swung open wide. Two massive Secret Service agents in dark suits stepped in, MP5 submachine guns held at the low ready. They scanned the room in a split second, their presence instantly changing the SODO, atmospheric pressure of the house. Brooke gasped and took a step back. Elliot dropped his phone and, then stepping through the phalanx of agents came the Attorney General. He looked tired, disheveled, and smelled of smoke. But he was unmistakably William J. Ellis, the man whose face was on the news every night. He walked right up to me, ignoring everyone else in the room. "Agent Reynolds," the attorney said, his voice loud and clear in the stunned silence. "Perimeter is secure." I looked at my father, whose mouth was hanging open. I looked at Brooke, whose face had gone pale as a ghost. "Perimeter is secure, mister." "Attorney," I said, "welcome to the safe house." "Perimeter is secure, Mr. Attorney," I said. The words hung in the air for exactly 1 second. Then the world turned inside out. The heavy oak front door didn't just open, it was breached. Two large men in dark, ill-fitting suits burst through the gap I had left. They moved with the terrifying speed of a tactical entry team. They didn't look like party guests. They looked like sledgehammers. "Federal agents, hands, show us your hands." The shout was deafening, bouncing off the marble floors and high ceilings of the Hargrove foyer. The lead agent, a man I knew as Johnson, swept the room with the propsis muzzle of his MP5 submachine gun. He wasn't aiming at anyone specific, but the threat was universal. "Make a hole, clear the center," Johnson barked. "Panic is a funny thing. It strips away the veneer of civilization instantly." The wealthy guests, CEOs, lawyers, socialites, didn't argue about property rights anymore. They scrambled. They dropped their crystal glasses. They backed up against the silk wallpapered walls, hands trembling in the air, terrified that this was a robbery or a raid. Elliot Hargrove, who seconds ago had been threatening to have me arrested, stumbled backward, knocking over a pedestal table. His face went from purple to chalk white. "What? What is this?" he stammered, holding his hands up, palms open. I didn't move. I stood in the center of the chaos, barefoot in my boots, watching the Red Sea part. And then he walked in. Attorney General William J. Ellis stepped through the doorway. He looked exactly like he did on CNN, only realer. He was 62 with silver hair and the kind of gravitas that you can't buy no matter how rich you are. His suit jacket was dusty from the explosion on the highway, and his tie was askew, but his presence was undeniable. He carried the weight of the Surprise, United States government in his stride. The room went silent, a vacuum-sealed silence. Elliot Hargrove froze. He blinked. He squinted. He was a man who donated heavily to political campaigns. He knew faces. He knew power. He looked at the man standing in his hallway. He looked at the Secret Service detail flanking him. Mr. Attorney," Elliot whispered. The arrogance drained out of him like water from a broken dam. Elliot was holding a glass of 1,998 Bordeaux in his right hand. As the realization hit his brain that the top legal officer in America was standing in his foyer, his fingers simply stopped working. Smash! The crystal goblet hit the pristine white Persian rug. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. The dark red wine exploded outward, staining the white wool like a fresh crime scene. Elliot didn't even look down. He couldn't take his eyes off the attorney. Attorney Ellis didn't look at Elliot. He didn't look at Brooke, who was standing with her mouth open, her face a mask of confusion and horror. He didn't look at my parents, who were pressed against the wall like frightened children. He walked straight to me. He stopped 2 feet away. He looked at my Kevlar vest, my radio coil, and the sweat on my forehead. Then, in front of everyone, he reached out and placed a firm, fatherly hand on my shoulder. It was a gesture of immense respect. "Reynolds," the attorney said. His voice was warm, tired, but loud enough for the back row to hear. "You did it again. That was a hell of a call on the extraction route. If we had stayed on the expressway for 2 more minutes, well, I don't think we'd be having this conversation." "Just doing the job, sir," I said, keeping my posture rigid. The safe house was the only viable option. "The safe house," he chuckled, glancing around the opulent foyer. "It's certainly comfortable, better than the bureau bunker." He squeezed my shoulder one last time, a signal of camaraderie that no amount of money could buy, and turned to face the room. He locked eyes with Elliot Hargrove. Elliot looked like he was about to faint. He tried to speak, but only a squeak came out. "Mr. Hargrove, I presume?" Attorney Ellis asked, stepping forward with his hand extended. The Secret Service agents lowered their weapons slightly, but kept their eyes scanning the guests. Yes, Elliot managed to choke out. "Yes, Mr. Attorney, I am honored. We didn't. I must apologize for the intrusion," the attorney said, shaking Elliot's limp hand. "My motorcade was ambushed on Kennedy Expressway. We took heavy fire. My lead vehicle was disabled." Gasps rippled through the room. Ambush, heavy fire. These were words from the news, not words for a Winnetka cocktail party. "It was a critical situation," the attorney continued, his voice smooth and diplomatic. "Fortunately, my lead security element took decisive action. She commandeered your residence as a temporary hardened location until the support team arrives." He turned back and gestured to me with an open palm. "You should be incredibly proud, Mr. Hargrove," the attorney said, smiling at the room. "I was told this is your daughter-in-law's sister. It is rare to see such instinct in the field." He looked at my parents. My father was leaning against the wall, his face gray. My mother was staring at the gun on my hip as if it were a venomous snake. Agent Sophia Reynolds is one of the finest assets the Executive Protection Service has. The attorney announced he wasn't just talking, he was testifying, a GS-15 senior special agent. "Do you know how few people reach that rank at her age? She runs my protection detail. She coordinates logistics for nuclear summits. She is quite literally the reason I get home to my wife at night. GS-15, Senior Special Agent, Nuclear Summits. The words hit the room like mortar shells. I watched B. Her eyes flicked from the attorney to me. I saw her brain trying to process the data. The delivery driver, the boxes, the logistics. Logistics? Brooke whispered, the word, slipping out of her mouth like a curse. Yes, logistics. The attorney nodded, hearing her. Secure logistics, the most complex kind. Reynolds here moves mountains so we can do our jobs. He turned back to Elliot, who was staring at the red stain on his rug, then at me. He looked at me with new eyes. He saw the vest not as a costume but as armor. He saw the delivery truck outside not as an eyesore but as a tank. We had no idea, Elliot stammered. Sophia never. She never said she wouldn't. The attorney said, his tone sharpening just a fraction. She's a professional. Silent professionals don't brag. They just serve. He looked at me again. I owe you a drink when this is over, Reynolds. Maybe something better than the water you were drinking earlier. I'll take a rain check, sir, I said. Chopper is 3 minutes out. We need to move you to the landing zone in the back garden. Lead the way, agent, he said. I looked at my family one last time. My mother was crying, not the fake social tears she used for effect. These were real tears of shock and humiliation. She realized that the rude daughter she had chased away with a cake knife had just brought the U.S. government into her living room. My father couldn't meet my gaze. He looked at the floor, and Brooke looked small in her shimmering silver dress, surrounded by her expensive things. She looked insignificant. Her success as a corporate lawyer felt like a child's game compared to the reality that had just walked through her door. Sophia B. started, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just tapped my earpiece. Johnson, take point, I ordered. Secure the back garden. We are moving the asset. Copy that, boss. Johnson replied loud and clear. Boss! I turned my back on them. I turned my back on the spilled wine, the shocked faces, and the years of being the failure. I walked the Attorney General through the kitchen, where I had been told to use the service entrance just an hour ago. But this time, I wasn't carrying soda. I was carrying the weight of the world, and I had never felt lighter. The extraction was textbook perfect. Within 12 minutes, a secondary convoy of black SUVs had swarmed the driveway of the Hargrove estate. A distinct rhythmic thumping filled the air as a medevac helicopter loitered overhead, its searchlight cutting through the darkness of the Winnetka night. I stood by the open door of the lead vehicle, watching Attorney Ellis climb inside. Before the door closed, he looked back at me one last time and gave a sharp salute. Get some rest, Reynolds, he said. That's an order. Yes, sir, I replied, returning the salute. The heavy door slammed shut. The convoy peeled out, tires crunching over the gravel, red and blue lights reflecting off the terrified faces of the neighbors who had gathered at their windows. And then silence returned. It wasn't the polite, murmuring silence of a cocktail party. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a courtroom after a guilty verdict has been read. I stood alone on the driveway, the adrenaline beginning to drain from my system, leaving behind a cold, crystal-clear clarity. I turned around. They were all standing there by the front steps. My parents, Brooke, Elliot, and Margaret. They looked like statues in a museum of regrets. Elliot Hargrove was the first to move. The bluster, the arrogance, the booming voice of the patriarch, it was all gone. In its place was the trembling anxiety of a man who realized he had indifferent, just threatened a federal officer with arrest in front of her boss. He walked toward me, his hands clasped together as if in prayer. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the badge on my belt. Miss Reynolds. Ah, madam, Elliot stammered. He actually used the word madam. I want to offer my sincerest apologies. Truly, there was a terrible misunderstanding tonight. He reached out a hand, then pulled it back, unsure if he was allowed to touch me. We had no idea of your position, he continued, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. If we had known, obviously the hospitality would have been different. I hope you won't hold my earlier outbursts against the family. It was just the the stress of the evening. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of audits. Fear of political fallout. Fear of losing his social standing. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Mr. Hargrove," I said. My voice was quiet, calm, and utterly indifferent. "It was a revelation. Please," he begged, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. "Let's go inside. Let's open a bottle of the good vintage. Margaret can have the chef. Prepare something. We should celebrate your heroism." I didn't answer him. I looked past him to my parents. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a cocktail napkin. My father was staring at his shoes, unable to lift his head. "Why didn't you say anything?" My mother choked out, her voice shrill with accusation and embarrassment. "Sophia, why? We thought you were struggling. We sent you coupons. We worried about you." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for me to accept her narrative, to accept that her cruelty was actually misguided love. "We just wanted you to be safe," she sobbed. "We thought you were driving a truck because you had no other options. Why? Let us believe that." I felt a ghost of a smile touch my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile you give when you finally solve a puzzle that has plagued you for years. "You didn't think, Mom?" I said. "You chose what?" She blinked, confused. "You chose to believe the lie," I said, stepping closer to her. The Kevlar vest felt like a shield against her emotional manipulation, because believing I was a failure was easier for you. It was comfortable. If I am the failure, then Brooke is the star. If I am the charity case, then you get to be the benevolent parents. I gestured to the house, to the party, to the life they had built on appearances. The truth that I am successful, that I am powerful, that I don't need you. That truth was inconvenient for your narrative, I said. So you ignored the signs. You ignored the reality. You wanted a delivery driver, so you made me one. My father looked up then. His eyes were red. "Sophia, we are your parents. Biologically, yes." I nodded. "But tonight you made it very clear that I am also a disgrace and unmannered. I believe those were your words, Dad." He flinched, as if I had slapped him. Finally, I turned to Brooke. She was standing slightly behind Elliot, her silver dress looking wrinkled, her makeup smudged. The golden child had lost her shine. She looked at me with a mixture of jealousy and fear. For the first time in her life, she was the small one. "You ruined my engagement party," Brooke whispered, petulant to the end. "No, Brooke," I said softly. "I saved your engagement party from being a crime scene, but honestly, I don't care." I looked at the ring on her finger, a big heavy diamond paid for by a man who was currently terrified of her sister. "Congratulations on the engagement," I said. "I really hope your fiancé loves the truth more than he loves the fiction you spin, because eventually the stories we tell about ourselves fall apart." I turned away. "Sophia, wait," my mother called out. "Where are you going?" "Stay. We can fix this." I didn't stop. I walked to my truck. The Chevy Silverado sat there rumbling quietly, a beast among the luxury sedans. It was scarred, dusty, and utilitarian. It was exactly like me. I climbed into the driver's seat. The leather was cool. The cab smelled of safety. I pulled my phone out to set the GPS. Ding. A notification slid down the screen. "Bank of America. Direct deposit received. U.S. Dept of Justice. Treasury amount $15,000. Memo hazard pay code red bonus." I stared at the number. $15,000 for 30 minutes of work. More than Brooke made in 2 months of filing briefs. More than the value of all the coupons my mother had ever clipped in her life. I didn't feel arrogant. I didn't feel the need to run back inside and show them the screen. The validation didn't come from them anymore. It came from the work. It came from the mission. It came from me. I connected my phone to the Bluetooth speakers. I scrolled through my playlist until I found the only song that fit the moment. The opening piano chords of Frank Sinatra's My Way filled the cabin. And now the end is near. And so I faced the final curtain. I looked in the rear view mirror one last time. I saw them standing there, a huddled group of people, shrinking in the distance, trapped in their golden cage of expectations and lies. I put the truck in gear. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway. I pressed the gas. The truck surged forward, leaving the Hargrove estate behind. I drove through the open gate, past the oak trees, and turned onto the main road. The highway stretched out before me, empty and dark, illuminated only by my headlights. But in the distance, on the horizon, the faintest hint of dawn was breaking. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't the sister. I wasn't the delivery girl. I rolled down the window, letting the cold wind hit my face, washing away the scent of stale perfume and old regrets. I was Agent Sophia Reynolds, and I had a long drive ahead. I did it my way. If there is one truth I want you to take from my story, it is this. You cannot force people to respect you, especially when their disrespect serves their own ego. For years, I tried to shrink myself to fit into my family's small box, but I learned that a diamond doesn't stop having value just because it's hidden in the dark. The most expensive currency you can ever pay is your own peace of mind just to make others comfortable. Stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your worth is not defined by their validation. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away and succeed in silence. If my journey sparked a fire in you today, please hit that like button. It helps us find other black sheep who need to hear this message. I want to hear your story in the comments. Have you ever had to hide your true self just to keep the peace in your family? Or have you finally found the courage to drive away like I did? Type "I choose my way" below to declare your freedom today. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story of justice and redemption. Until next time, stay strong and keep